What's going on, everybody? Bobby G back again, aka Bobby Bookworm. Um, 3 more books today. First one, it's not very big, but it is heavy, and it is loaded. It is a book that was said to have shocked the nation. It is published through Living Sacrifice Book Company, which helps out with Voice of the Martyrs. It is called Tortured for Christ. Richard Wurmbrand. That's Richard Wurmbrand on the back. That's his prison photo. He's with God now, but it's a hard story because, for those who don't know, to give some background on Richard Wurmbrand, he's a Romanian Jew, as is his wife, as is his son, obviously. He was an atheist for many years, gave his life to Christ prior to World War II, as did his wife, prior to having their son. He went through stuff that I just find myself this big in the world of Christianity, and I think Western Christians would find themselves this big if they read this story. And understanding where my place is in the light of God and in the sight of heaven. I say that because this man has so many wounds. He spent a total combined of 14 years in communist prisons. I believe it was 8 underground was his first bid, where he had to sit down. And then his second bid, after being out for 2 years, was 6 years. Both of which were in underground prisons 30 feet below the ground. And they made it so that the prisoners, not just himself, would just feel agonized because, one, no sunlight. Two, it got to a point where the guards wore padded shoes so they couldn't hear him in the prisons. This man has some very deep wounds, including quite a few scars in his back where you can see puncture wounds. His wife ended up doing, Sabina ended up doing 3 years in a re-education labor camp. His son, during the time of the Nazis, prior to the communists taking over Romania, had to change his name from Michael to Michael. Otherwise, Nazis would have had their head. The only thing that saved Richard Wurmbrand during that time, even though he was Jewish, was that he was also a minister. A Lutheran minister, to be specific. But still, they had to watch it. But under communism, he went to the Romanian parliament where the ruler at the time under the Russians would ask the ministers to pledge their allegiance to the government, to which Richard's wife, Sabina, said, "Richard, you must stand up," because this was being publicly broadcast. "You must wipe this shame off the face of Christ, and you must speak up." To which Richard said to his wife, Sabina, he said, "If I speak up, you're going to lose your husband." To which his wife retorted, and I quote, "I do not wish to have a coward as a husband." And he spoke up, and he spoke against communism, and he spoke that the gospel is the way, and for that he made himself a marked man, which is why he did a total of 14 years again. First bid that he had to sit being 8 years. The second bid he sat down was 6 years in an underground cell. There are quotables from all over this. There's so much in here. I mean, there are quotes everywhere. But boy, I mean, just, I mean, there's stuff I have here. There's so much in here. It's hard to give a review on this one because it's such a load to read, even though, again, it's not a big book. It's not a very big book at all. And there's a particular quote here that I'm going to read because it really stands out for something. Whether you believe in God or not, this particular quote, I think, speaks volumes. At one point in chapter 4 in the book, he says, and I quote, "A man really believes not what he recites in his creed, but only the things that he is ready to die for." Give you that one more again. A man really believes not what he recites in his creed, but only the things he is ready to die for. That in of itself speaks absolute volumes with this. I mean, jeez. I'm going to read one more quote, a couple paragraphs, because I want people to get the enormity of this book. This is again in chapter 4, and I quote, "In the West I found in many churches the contrary sentiment of that which was predominant in the underground church behind the bamboo and former iron curtains. Many Christians in the West have no love for those in captive nations. Proof of it is that they do nothing for their salvation. They have missions to persuade Christians of one denomination to change to another. But many have no mission to captive nations, claiming that such work is against the law. They don't love them. Otherwise, they would have long since created such an impossible-looking mission, just as William Carey would love the Indians and Hudson Taylor and the Chinese have created their respective missions. But it is not enough that they do not love those in captive nations and do nothing to win them for Christ. By their complacency, by their neglect, and sometimes by acting as actual accomplices, some Western church leaders strengthen the infidels in their infidelity. They help the communists to intrude into Western churches and to win leadership in the churches of the world. They help Christians remain unaware of the danger of communism." Mind you, this was written after his second bid, when he was finally ransomed along with their wife and son for $10,000 US, which back in, I believe this was the 60s? Back then, $10,000 went a lot longer than it does now. But this is a book that, if you really want to learn what it really means to be an underground Christian and part of the underground church, if you really want to understand the creative ways that he got around being obedient to God while still trying to be obedient to the law, to which, by the way, sidebar, St. Augustine said that an unjust law is no law at all. That's a little sidebar for you. But you have to read this book. You have to read this book because it is a first-hand account of what Christianity under communism looks like. And let's not act like communism is dead, because it ain't. Let's not act like socialism is dead, because it ain't. And let's not act for darn sure like it ain't in this country. And that they're not coming for people of faith like me. And others I know. That's my first book review. I'll be back here in a little bit with the other two. Take care.